Hi, I'm Elaine Ng, and I am publisher and editor of ArtAsiaPacific. And I'm personally very excited about Hong Kong Spotlight by Art Basel, not just because I want to see art and old friends in person, but because there's some really incredible works for sale by young, up-and-coming artists, female artists, and of course, blue chip favorites. One of the most exciting booths is Empty Gallery, with their presentation of two young artists, Henry Shum and Cece Wu. Empty Gallery is only 5 years old, but the gallery has quickly made its mark in Hong Kong as the most innovative and experimental gallery in the city. The gallery stages experimental sound performances. They mount historically important, massive multimedia film installations and sculptures made out of unusual materials, including hormones. They also sometimes show paintings, and most recently, paintings by Henry Shum, a young Hong Kong artist who is only 22 years old and graduated this year from Chelsea College of Art. And Henry makes these really exquisite, ethereal paintings and drawings that feel almost post-impressionist and definitely made in a bygone era. Cece Wu is a Beijing-born, New York-based artist who also shows with Empty. Cece collaborated with two friends, Xiaofei Mo and Pond. And this work should appeal to any collector interested in new media art and cutting-edge technology. The work is comprised of drawings and photographs that Cece and Xiaofei took on the streets of Hong Kong and New York. They then shared the images with Pond, which is in fact an AI machine. And it created a text based on what it saw, digitally that is. And the text can be seen in the subtitles of the video, as well as this bound book. And the work is really poetic and surreal and a true reflection of the very strange times that we're living in. So we come to Exit Gallery, a gallery from Hong Kong that is known for giving a platform to local artists. This adventurous gallery has given some of the very first shows to artists like Firenze Lai, Chris Hune, and Nadim Abbas, artists who regularly are collected and exhibited internationally. And for Hong Kong Spotlight by Art Basel, they are doing a solo presentation of Stephen Wang, who was born in 1986. When people mention the word Hong Kong, the first image that usually comes to mind is a dense cityscape full of striking skyscrapers and endless apartment towers, something resembling a scene from Blade Runner. And the reason I love Stephen's work is because he captures a side of the city that only Hong Kongers know. So it's lush vegetation, it's rolling hills. In fact, Hong Kong is much more green and much more rural than it is normally depicted. Stephen is an avid hiker, and he created these paintings based on memories or recollections of walks he took, as well as those that he imagines he might take. But the images that he includes in his paintings are something that everyone in Hong Kong is familiar with and has experienced, especially in this year of endless waves of COVID and social distancing measures, where people basically took to the hiking trails as a form of relief. This is the booth of Axel Vervut Gallery, an established gallery based in Antwerp, Belgium. And in 2014, they opened a location here in Hong Kong, first in the Central Business District, and now they have 2 sprawling floors in the industrial neighborhood of Wang Peng. And the artists that they typically show are often involved in important post-war movements, such as Zero in Europe and Dansei-kwa in South Korea. I'm particularly excited by their solo presentation of Yuko Nasaka, one of the rare female members of the key Japanese post-war Gutai Art Association. The works here date from the early 1960s up until the last 5 years. Gutai roughly translates as concreteness and embodiment. And the group's works were experimental and process-based. And they were direct artistic responses to Japan's effort to renew itself after its defeat in World War II. Nasaka was invited to participate with Gutai for these grid-like plaster reliefs. And what she did was combine glue, plaster, and clay to create these circular forms on a homemade turntable, much like how a potter would throw clay on a wheel. She made sure that no circle was perfect by slashing or attacking the circle. Then she would spray this really delicate layer of car paint on its surface with an air compressor. So what you're looking at is not ceramic glaze, but simply car paint. Nasaka was interested in the symbolic meaning of the circle, something infinite and planetary. And she was interested in experimenting with color, form, and materials. So imagine encountering these works in the early 1960s, just how futuristic Nasaka's methods and aesthetics were at the time. Now we're in the booth of Lehman Mopin, international gallery with spaces in New York, Seoul, Hong Kong, and London. And they are doing a solo presentation of Lee Bull. I'm a huge fan of Lee Bull's work. She is a Korean female artist who has been showing internationally for over 3 decades. You may remember her very striking, massive silver Zeppelin entitled Willing to be Vulnerable, Metallized Balloon, which was shown last year in Art Basel Hong Kong's Encounter section. These are much more human scale works that one could easily live with in their home, but they contain all of the same recurring themes that you see in all of Lee's work, large or small. That is our humans' obsession with technology, almost like blind faith, and how often technology actually fails humanity. Just like the Zeppelin, this innovative form of transportation that killed hundreds and hundreds of people. These works are from her Perdu series, which is a reference to earlier series called Cyborg and Anagrams. And these are really exquisite pieces that draw you in. They're made with mother of pearl, combined with acrylic paint and resin. And although they're really haunting to look at, we are completely mesmerized by the surface, much like how Lee sees our fascination with technology, something full of both hope and fear. We're in the booth of Levy Gorby, an international gallery with spaces in New York, London, Paris, and most recently, Hong Kong. They have a solo presentation of one of the great masters of 20th century Chinese art, Zhao Wuqi, whose work is revered and highly sought after by collectors across Asia. Levy Gorby is showing 5 works that successfully bridge the traditions of Chinese art together with Western-inspired abstraction, Zhao's signature aesthetic. This particular work is an instantly recognizable, almost iconic Jiawuqi abstraction. Here we see this super saturated range of translucent blues, which creates this really magical dreamscape. While this work is a much more unusual and rare piece to see by Jiawuqi, which is his work on paper, showing his origins in Chinese brush and ink. This work was made around 5 to 6 years before his death, but what we see is Zhao's spontaneity with these really playful gestural brushstrokes, creating a work that is full of light, full of movement, and full of joy. Now we're in the booth of 10 Chancery Lane, which is a gallery here in Hong Kong with an international program which also places a very strong emphasis on artists from the Asia Pacific. And the work I'd like to point out is by Wang Peng, who is a self-taught artist. He was born in China in 1949, and he was one of the key members of a Chinese avant-garde artist group called the Stars. And he is considered one of China's very first contemporary sculptors. Wang Peng's wooden sculptures are explorations of the human form in all its different manifestations. So for instance, he explores sensuality through a sculpture where we see two couples embracing. He also does things that are much more suggestive and abstract, like this piece here, which is called Untitled Bust. So what I love about these works is that although they are most definitely contemporary, there's something very primitive in terms of its qualities, and they're very, very timeless sculptures. This art gallery was founded in Paris in 1977. They also operated in the US, and in 2010, they opened their gallery in Hong Kong. The gallery focuses on modern and contemporary art, and the artist that I would like to point out today is the work of Andrew Look, who is a multimedia artist based here in Hong Kong, who was born in 1988. His work explores evolution and humanity's fraught relationship with nature and technology. These works are from his Past Forward series, and at first glance, it might look like a white minimalist canvas, but in fact, they are white plaster wall reliefs. You might even consider them sculptures, meant to look like fossilized archaeological fragments from the future. You might call this a post-Cambrian dystopic collage of trilobites, Dorito chips, Frito-Lay's plastic packaging, and a set of headphones. Basically, the only thing that remains from the 21st century, if we were to look forward into the future, are these processed foods and cheap manufactured plastic goods. This rather bleak vision of the future creates this really uncomfortable sensation of both attraction and repulsion. And when you look at it, you don't know whether to laugh out loud or to cry. I would definitely keep an eye on this artist. There are 4 artists showing large-scale installations and paintings in Hong Kong Spotlight by Art Basel. This is actually a continuation of Art Basel Hong Kong's section called Encounters. These kind of works are intended for private and public museums because most people in Hong Kong don't live in massive homes, although technically you could put the works in storage. And we're looking at the work of Kim Sooja, who is a Korean female artist who began her career in the late 1980s. And this is a very historic work which was made in 1991 and only shown once before at Axel Vervut's gallery in Hong Kong last year. Kim Sooja is known for her Botari series, which looks at issues of migration and displacement through the Korean tradition of women bundling objects in these very vibrant patchwork cloths. And they would basically wrap objects like food, clothing, gifts, and other precious items in these really exquisite textiles. And this is actually a transitional work, which she made before embarking on her Botari series. What she's done was wrap these 7 metal rings in fragments of clothing and thread. It's actually inspired by Buddhist and Taoist beliefs of non-action, which is very central to her work. This repetitive action of wrapping evokes nostalgia, labor, women's work, as well as meditation and spirituality. So these are just some of the exceptional works on view during these really exceptional times at Hong Kong Spotlight by Art Basel. So if you're in Hong Kong, please put on your masks and come and experience this really rare opportunity.